Before we explore some of the specific challenges and opportunities in today's auto industry, let's set the stage. The word unprecedented gets used a lot in the media, maybe too much, but it may be accurate here. Is the industry today undergoing the most change and the most rapid change that is seen in this 100 years of history, or am I missing something?
No, Larry, I think you're right. I think, if you think about some of the big shocks, if you will, like the gas crisis of the 70s there, those are pretty big because it forced some of the retooling of from rear wheel drive, for instance, to front wheel drive, if you remember that. So that was big, but this is much larger in scope and scale, and probably will take a few years to really take hold. But it's coming very, very fast with the electric vehicle piece of it, and also I would say really the retooling to a sustainable future, which I'm very excited about that for myself and my kids and the planet. So it is I think the biggest in 100 years for sure.
So let's start with the elephant in the room, electrification.
Mhm.
Just a few years ago, electric vehicles were mostly dismissed as niche products. They were almost a curiosity. Now it seems that electric may soon be perhaps the primary propulsion system for land vehicles. What changed?
I think a lot's changed. If you think about some of the evidence, like a few years ago, not even that long ago, I would say there's a lot of people that really fought the notion of climate change. That's you can see around the country and around the world some of the massive events because of climate change and the destruction of some of the our precious earth and some of the climate pieces that you see, whether it's fires or floods or wild temperature cycles, glaciers melting, the whole thing. That's a big one. I would also say electric vehicles weren't, in fact, niche vehicles. They were typically very expensive vehicles, and if they weren't very expensive, then the people who are making them lost money on them. General Motors, for instance, we dipped our toe in the water on several electric vehicles along the way, starting really with the first electric commercial vehicle, retail-wise, which was the EV1 back in the 90s, and that was a dedicated platform, a dedicated car. We did it because we saw that future, but the rest of the market wasn't quite ready for something like that, and it was expensive, and it was something that you put into a retail market. It's pretty tough to sell to get people interested in it. So those episodic vehicles like that aren't something that the industry is a machine. It's a selling machine. The average age on the road of a car on the road right now is 12.2 years, which is probably one of the oldest vehicle ages we've seen in a long time because of the pandemic and the chip crisis. So you have those things, and then you have an accelerant like some of the inflation and gas price increases recently, but those aren't really the big drivers. We've seen interest, and we do a lot of customer research on electric vehicles and interest. And it's really spiked over the last 2 years. So people care about the planet. They care about the environment. They don't want the United States to be behind in the adoption and the technology associated with electric vehicles. That's a great thing. And I think it's going to drive some sustainability changes in the way we power our grid, which is mainly coal-fired these days. And I think you're going to see some major changes into the sustainable energy piece of that, and we already have.
So as you said, the industry is going electric, just almost completely, and it seems to be a race to do that. Traditionally, first to market has been kind of a competitive advantage. A lot of your competitors are taking current products and adapting them either as hybrid or plug-in hybrid, so they get to market very quickly. General Motors seems to be taking a different approach where you're designing very specific pure electric cars, which take a little bit longer to get to market because they're all new. Are you losing something by giving up that first to market advantage?
Not at all. About 3.5 years ago, first of all, we're in production with the Hummer. We're in production with the Lyriq for Cadillac. We're in production with the Bolt EUV and the Bolt, the regular Bolt. So, we've got four entries at various parts of the segments that we're doing right now. but the pipeline is full. We've got 9 vehicles in the next few months that are going to come to market. So the pipeline is very full. And if you go back 3.5 years ago or so, we saw this from a regulatory standpoint. We also, again, did a lot of customer research and found that people would be very interested in an electric alternative. When we did that, we said, okay, we're going to go look at what it really costs and look at architecting something like a Tahoe or a Yukon or an Escalade, our big SUV platforms. What does it really take to put batteries into that and electrify it? And then we did it on the lower end too. We took our existing internal combustion engine platforms and looked at what it would take to electrify those. When we did that, we looked at the architecture and the body and the way the vehicle is designed from a frame body standpoint. And if you look at that, it was designed for an internal combustion engine. So there's a lot of what we call SCAR design flaws that are carried in that car. When you start putting batteries in it, you can't, number one, get enough battery in it to have the right range. And we know that 300 miles is roughly the sweet spot for most vehicles, for most people in market in America. And then secondly, you couldn't drive cost because you can't get scale on it. And so while you can get it into market, it's very, very expensive and it's very hard to make money on those. So if you look at our competitors, they've already announced that by 2025, they're going to have dedicated electric platforms. That's great, but you're going to have to capitalize that twice. So they're capitalizing those vehicles right now, and then they'll capitalize them again. And we're going to bring the 30 vehicles to market here very quickly with dedicated platforms. Everything from low roof vehicles to Hummers to SUVs to Equinox-like vehicles to the Lyric by Cadillac. So we've got all the brands, we've got all the segments, and we're in execution mode at this point. The other piece of this I'd bring up is, aside from the car architecture itself, is the decision to go all in and skip the hybrid step you mentioned. And hybrids, they're really not good for anybody. In fact, a lot of hybrids are worse from a greenhouse gas standpoint than traditional internal combustion engines in some cases. So the hybrid solution sounds like a great idea, but you're actually carrying around 2 propulsion systems in that. You're carrying a gasoline engine, you're carrying a battery pack. That's a very expensive alternative. Frankly, customers don't care about that. And so I'd rather spend that next dollar of R&D on vertically integrating our cell chemistry, which we've done over the last 3 years. And we're going to make our own battery packs. In fact, the Lordstown Ultium cell production plant is coming online here in the next few months. So we're done with that plant. The next cell plant will be in Spring Hill, Tennessee, right down the road from where you are, Lauren. And so that's going up right now, and that's almost done here in the next year. And so, as we bring these big cell plants online, we're going to have a big competitive advantage because we'll own the chemistry, we'll own the execution, we'll own the battery packs, and we'll own what used to be traditional engine and transmission propulsion. We're going to own the electric motors, we'll own the cells, we'll own the packs, and we own the proprietary architecture. So, we did it once, we did it right, and we're really not behind. We're gonna, when these come out, and they are. I mean, the Hummer, you've seen the press on the Hummer. It's like it's a super truck, and I'd say we really did that in 2 years. So that's quite a good speed to do it. So that's a little color on why we did it and what we're doing. But the strategy is product excellence. And it is enabled by Ultium. It is enabled by all the things I mentioned, but you got it. At the end of the day, it's all about the product and the customer.
This whole electrification thing is also impacting the industry beyond just the product line. The traditional automobile was primarily a mechanical device with a few electrical features. Now everything's going electric or electronic for customer features. How does the industry recruit the new technology workforce skills they need to design and deliver the electrics, but also keep the existing traditionally skilled employees engaged and excited?
Well, I'll tell you, if you look at what you're talking about from a skill set standpoint, and good engineers are good engineers. And so The people who do our propulsion control systems for ICE vehicles love doing our control systems for our electric vehicles and vice versa. And so if we're making exciting products in both our internal combustion engine as we run those out and our electric vehicles as we ramp those up, people want to work here. And, we've got a great vision of 000, which is zero emissions, zero congestion, and that's and zero crashes. That vision is a beacon for a lot of people that are coming into our company. So I'd say we have about 60% of our workforce is 5 years or less. And so it is not a traditional automaker anymore. So it's and a lot of that, as you mentioned, isn't mechanical. In fact, if I ran a university, I would have an electromechanical element to that, because it's rarely just a mechanical engineer, just an electrical engineer, just a thermodynamics engineer, just a body engineer, whatever that engineer is. Those silos are very blended. We love the crossover of electro and software, mechanical, and that drives a talent base which can be very agile. And I can't stand when people talk about how we're going to split the company, or we split our talent base into electric vehicles or internal combustion vehicles. We don't do that. We've got people that want to work on and love working on Corvettes. We've got people that love working on Hummers. In fact, the ex-chief engineer of the Camaro is the chief engineer of the Hummer. And so, that's really a competitive advantage. So that's the way we look at it.
That's great. There's also some electrification issues that are beyond the industry's control. For example, the fueling station infrastructure for gasoline-powered cars grew up with the industry over the last century. What's going to be the infrastructure solution to recharging electric vehicles quickly, conveniently? And is it going to be able to keep up with this explosion of new electric cars that are coming on the market?
That's a great question. The infrastructure piece of this is multifaceted, and it starts with the car, though, I would say, because if you look at the way the gasoline infrastructure is used today, if you're taking a trip, not if you go to work every day and drive a car to work, but if you're going on a trip and you're going to use the vehicle in that way, you got about a 15-minute stop to refuel, maybe get some water, use the restroom, take a break, stretch your legs. If you can have an 800 volt system on an electric vehicle that does 100 miles in 10 minutes like our Hummer does, that's a big deal, right? And so you got to be able to get the energy in and out of the vehicle first. That's number one. Number two, on the infrastructure piece of it, the way we're approaching that is, we've got about 4,000 dealers. And so we're going to spend $750 million to really go at 40,000 level 2 chargers that are within, or in a dealership or close to a dealership where those dealerships are. And about 95% of the U.S. population lives within 10 miles of one of our dealerships. And so that's a great start. I'd also say that, I met with the Edison Group, which is CEOs of the power companies across the United States, and they're very interested in actually partnering with each other to actually go at some of the rural infrastructure that needs to happen, rest areas or whatever, across the United States to get that in place. But I would also say, we've got a fuel cell that is portable, and we're going to sell those to the power companies instead of having them capitalize some of the big power structure into places that's very, very expensive. So we're actually making those in Michigan right now in Brownstown. So those fuel cells can power 5 or 6 cars. They're portable, and it doesn't cost very much to run hydrogen in those, as you would imagine. And so that's a big enabler. We're actually doing that for we're going to do that for our Cruise autonomous vehicle fleets. We're going to have those charging stations in the grid where they're operating ride share and goods delivery. So those are some big enablers that we don't expect the government to go in and do all this for us. We're going to do it, and I would say that's a very, very exciting proposition on those fronts. I'd also say, oil companies like BP and Shell are now getting ready to use their own gasoline footprints to put electric vehicle charging stations in. So for the first time, you're seeing oil companies put in charging stations into that footprint, which, boy, if things aren't changing, I don't know what is, right? It's pretty awesome.
Another thing that's changing a whole lot besides electrification is the whole idea of autonomous vehicles. Are we going to get anytime soon truly autonomous vehicles so I can plug into a destination a couple states away, turn on my laptop and work until I get there?
I can tell you about a month ago, I went out to our cruise unit in San Francisco, and we're running driverless routes there, and for the public. And so I rode in one and called the car on my phone. The car comes around the corner. You get into the car. Car takes you wherever you want. You get out. You eat dinner. You do whatever you want. Call the car back. The car comes back. It's all happening. And so the only piece of this is, we want to have an impeccable safety record, and that's what we're proving. So we got to prove that safety case, and we got to prove it to we're still regulated on all this. So the legislature piece of this, the final step is being able to charge money for what we're doing out there. That's the final regulatory step, and we're very close because we've already built the safety cases for it. So we're very, very close. In fact, we're doing autonomous rides or autonomous trips for Walmart to deliver goods to people in Phoenix, Arizona. So that's already happening too. So the state to state piece of it is actually handled by a different system that we're calling Ultra Cruise. As you know, today we have Super Cruise, which is hands-free driving safely, by the way, where it monitors the driver and everything, unlike some of our competitors. And we've got millions of miles on that over quite a few years of highway miles, because that's where we mapped first. We mapped the highways across the United States. The next phase of that is Ultra Cruise, where we get about 95% of your driving conditions are going to be what you think of as autonomous, but they're actually supervised. But you can drive from my house to the Little Caesars Arena. That's an arena down where we have concerts and hockey games and Piston games in Detroit, but it's door to door. And so it'll be opening up the use conditions from just highways to about 95% of what you drive. So that's a big deal, and so that'll come right as we start offering the commercialization of rides too. So it's all happening.
The other thing there's all these things are layered on top of each other. There's this whole idea of a changing customer expectations. When I was a kid, a long time ago, everybody drove sedans and they bought them outright. Then consumer leasing became popular, and the products mix has recently shifted to more trucks and SUVs. Now some consumers don't want to even own or lease a vehicle. They simply want to pay by the hour. Where's the consumer mindset headed, and how is the industry going to react?
Yeah, there's been a lot of people try and do what you just said, which is it's sharing a vehicle, right? Whether it's owned by a centralized company or another individual that wants to be able to rent their vehicle out for occasional use. We did it in Cadillac, Zipcar, you name it, people have tried it. The really tough part of that is paying for the abuse and the tear up of the car when it's used for an hour or two, because people aren't very nice to the vehicles. So you end up paying a lot of money to refurbish the vehicle to keep it correct for the next person or for sale, wherever that life is on the vehicle. So there's a company out there, Scott Painter is running, is called Autonomy, which is they think they have the business model that right. And it's going to be interesting to watch because, you'd think that people would be interested in doing that. It's pretty tough. It's a pretty tough deal, and it's not as popular as what, people may say they're willing to do when you get right down to it. And so, hey, I want to rent a really nice, convertible sports car for the weekend. I need a truck. I need an SUV to haul my family around and do everything, or crossover during the week. It sounds like a great idea. It's just really hard to make money on it.
Okay. I spent a lot of years interviewing corporate presidents on leadership. So I've got this one last closing question before we go to audience questions. When an industry is rapidly changing, what determines if it's an opportunity to be exploited or a challenge to survive? Is it the specific circumstances of the change or the mindset of the leadership?
Well, I think the mindset of the leadership leading the changes is got to be fundamental because if there's hesitation or delay to seize the opportunity or change, the organization will see it. And that will set the organization back years. So I'd rather, personally, I've been around long enough where, you don't want to make stupid decisions. That's not what I'm saying, but I'd rather take chances on good bets, good sound bets. And if they don't work out, they don't work out. And the downside when you do it, but I'd rather take those bets and see. That's the way we've been looking at this here for quite a while since Mary and I have been leading the company.
Great. Thanks, Mark. We got a bunch of questions that were submitted when people registered, and they're submitting them on the chat room. So let's get into some audience questions.
Great.
First one is from a Duke alum named Peter. And if I recognize his last name correctly, he knows quite a bit about vehicle batteries. His question: how confident is GM on the ability to make mass market affordable electric vehicles in the future? Is there a clear roadmap to reduce battery costs to support the approach?
There is. It's a great question because this fall we're going to show for the first time a $30,000 Equinox, which you won't see mass adoption of electric vehicles until you get to the price points where most people and families can buy an electric vehicle as their primary vehicle. And so they got to have utility in it. They got to be able to use it for everything. Until that happens, this other stuff, at $100,000 and whatever is interesting. And there'll be people doing that as a second or third car because they're interested and they want to be a first adopter. But the Equinox and Blazer that you're going to see here in about a month is going to demonstrate that we know how to do this. And the battery chemistry is a path that is joined at the hip, if you will, to the vehicle cadence that we're introducing. So, it's sort of the chicken and egg on the volume piece of it. On the other hand, we know that we can drive it pretty low. And we know the places where that's going to happen, and we know the vehicles where it's going to happen, so that we, have attainable vehicles with good profit that eventually sit side by side with our internal combustion engine vehicles until the adoption takes hold and people are interested in it and they see what it is and they want it.
Question from Ken. Question: do you think the dedicated roadway should be set aside for autonomous vehicles so they can operate in a homogeneous environment?
Someone asked me one time, actually, several lawmakers have offered their assistance to the industry to have autonomous vehicle lanes or a stretch of highway dedicated to autonomous vehicles. I frankly don't know what that's for. The way we're training our AI system in San Francisco is the most difficult driving environment they could ever imagine. And so we've trained our AI and our system to adapt, to everything from we had a raccoon jump in front of the vehicle here. We've had people taunt our vehicles because they want to see if they can fool an autonomous vehicle. Not particularly safe, but we've had all that happen. And so we train stuff in San Francisco that you can't believe. And so that's where we do it because it's the toughest. When we go to somewhere like Arizona, it's significantly less challenging, but we deploy there. So I don't think those lanes, I can't understand why that would be a good idea, I guess. I just can't.
Another question from Lori. We talked about autonomous vehicles for personal transportation. She wants to know what's the company thinking on driverless transportation for mass transportation?
Well, mass transportation, we're producing this right now, actually, at Factory Zero in Detroit, alongside of the Hummers and then the Silverado and the Sierra, something called the A100 or A110, which is the Cruise Origin, which is a dedicated people carrier. and rideshare vehicle that has seats that face each other with luggage capability. So, we're going to deploy those where it solves problems for people in pretty dense urban environments that don't have cost-effective infrastructure and don't and really solve a lot of traffic and congestion problems for people. And so you'll see those deployed there first. And I would also say those are also capable of doing just autonomous goods transportation. So, and grocery stores are one of the biggest ones we've seen through the pandemic grow into a delivery system, but it's costly for the stores because they're employing a lot of people, a lot of cars, and the cars aren't particularly package efficient. So you're going to see some pretty great business things come out of that. So I think that can all happen. And we're starting to make, we're the only ones making, fully dedicated autonomous vehicles to put on the road here as soon as we clear the hurdles to be able to charge for it. So we're ready to go. We're making the vehicles. The vehicles are out at our proving grounds in Milford, and we're beginning to deploy into San Francisco. So we're ready.
I have a question from Paul. Will GM be pushing for federal laws and or regulations that make it easier to mine in the United States for the minerals needed for the electric car batteries?
I would say that we're not. I'm not sure that's highest on our agenda. But I would say what is on our agenda really high is the ability to take the batteries as they come off of cycle and recycle 95+% of those rare earth materials that are hard to get. And so we're working very close with the people that we're going to buy from to be able to recover out of those batteries the material for second and third and fourth uses, so that we don't have new mining and new battery cell manufacturing out of only new materials. So that's very high on our agenda. The mining piece of it, I'm not sure we're the best ones to do that. I think the government, if they are serious about this and they want us getting these materials in the United States and North America, needs to figure that out so that it's not as difficult. But good question. But we're focused on the recycling piece of it, quite honestly.
Okay. Question from David, who I think is based in Canada. Can you share your thoughts as a leader on key talent attraction and retention in today's environment? Top of mind issues are the dynamics around remote work and around asymmetric abilities between types of companies to incorporate equity into compensation.
Yep, that's a great one. We're becoming famous for equity and compensation, which I'm really happy about that. So we're one of the leaders in that. So we look at that all the time. So that is not something that we let drift. On the attracting talent and maintaining talent, we again 3 years ago we looked at other people who are going to Silicon Valley and trying to get software engineers to leave Silicon Valley, and the unicorns and the entrepreneurial pieces that are happening there, which are outstanding, and the talent is outstanding. And we said, okay, let's go look at where Silicon Valley is recruiting. And so we did. And so we have tech centers in Israel. We have an amazing tech center in Israel. We have an amazing tech center in Markham in Canada. And we have an incubation spot in Markham as well. And so this ties into the hybrid work question, because we don't need those people to come to Detroit necessarily. If they are from Markham, Canada, or we do have a small one out on the West Coast. It's a Hughes lab that is a partnership with Boeing, and we do a lot of our ventures work out there. And so we have those, and we have those people in place, and they work either from that facility or from home. They're very happy. They don't have to uproot. They don't have to roll the dice on going, across to the West Coast. And we've been very successful at recruiting and retention there. And that's been an extremely successful model that we started again about three and a half years ago with those footprints. And it's pretty awesome. So you don't have to come to Detroit. If you want to come to Detroit, great. So we still have our cell chemistry and cell production on the Tech Center site in Warren in R&D, where we can do experimentation on cell chemistry back and forth extremely rapidly. And then we take it over to across the railroad tracks to one of the most advanced validation battery cell and pack facilities in the world. And so we can do that validation on those chemistries very quickly. The reason why I bring that up is because a lot of people want to come work on that. And so if they want to come to Detroit and do that in Detroit at Warren, our tech center, they do that. And so, very, very progressive place. If pre-COVID, our tech center was redone. We put about $1.5 billion into it. And there's 19,000 people on site there between design, engineering, R&D, our battery chemistry labs, all that stuff. And then now we moved our sales and marketing to be integrated into that footprint as well. So a very different place to work, and we've got sites that people are very attracted to.
Hey, now we got a question from current Duke student, Ariaman. I hope I pronounced it right. This fits right into one of your hobbies. You like to race cars. The question is, will the rise in electrification impact GM's involvement in NASCAR and IndyCar?
That's a great question. What's going to happen in those series, and it's not a big stretch, you probably have seen hints of this, but in those series will be a hybridization effect of electrifying race cars, but they're not going to go all electric. And I think that's very compelling. It's very interesting, and so you'll see us doing hybrid type LMDH cars for Le Mans. You'll see us participate in NASCAR as they bring hybridization into the NASCAR powertrain, and then you'll see us race in Indy when they do that too. So, we're developing our own hybrid system to do it in each one of those series, and we're leading the way for the sanctioning bodies because we have a lot of electrification experience now, and putting that with a gasoline race engine is something we kind of know how to do. So you'll see that happen. I don't think you're going to see all electrified racing. I don't think it's going to be internal combustion only like it has been. And so you're going to see hybridization go through each one of those series at a little bit different time.
Okay, another question back to electrification. And our guest says they've got a friend who's considered an electric vehicle purchase, but they're concerned about life of battery, replacement costs for the battery, and then the whole environmental issue of when the battery needs to be recycled. How do you address that?
Sure. It's really a battery question. First of all, our batteries are capable of outliving the mechanical components of the car. So the question is, we're gonna get into business on second reuse of those batteries as the car. Cars get wrecked, cars get abused, everything. You can't imagine what happens to people's cars. Those batteries, though, are very long life batteries, and they have a lot of state of charge left when the car is retired. We found that on the bolts and sort of the volt as well. And so the secondary market of those is very attractive to the power companies as well, because there's one thing the grid has problems with is storing energy for the peaks of use. And so if you can imagine batteries that would power things in California when PG&E has to turn the lights out, if you will, because of fire risk or whatever, you can imagine car batteries after life powering subdivision blocks, houses, the whole thing. That's a huge market that I think you'll see evolve. And I was also mentioned that the Ultium platform, this dedicated platform, and our batteries have a very interesting characteristic that I don't think anybody else has. And that is, as the battery cell chemistries change over time, which I talked about a little bit, those are backwardly compatible on a module level into the packs of the cars that are on the road. And they will operate and will be controlled to be compatible. So backwardly compatible modules, even if it's one module that you got to replace in a battery, you can do that. And that's a very, very interesting proposition that a lot of people don't talk about. But, the battery piece of that, the recyclability is something that we're really working hard on. So we want to, again, be able to take 95% of that material and bring it back into the next battery for the next new car and not have to mine and not have to do all that. And that's the plan. So we're getting close.
Related question. A contact in the electric generation industry told me about the stress they felt when greenhouse vegetables and greenhouse flower growers became popular because they were suddenly drawing lots of power 24/7. So the question is, if and when we get to the point the majority of the vehicles are electric, are we as a nation going to have the power generation capability and the distribution system to supply them?
Short answer is yes. And here's the big difference. And I think probably the legalization of all kinds of things people are growing, right? And the power usage has probably changed things a lot, right? I mean, I don't know what those stats are, but there's a big difference between what that power draw is and what's going to happen with electric vehicles, and that is again energy storage. So if you can imagine the vehicles, a big battery sitting in your garage, plugged in, whether it's charging or not, the way I use my electric car is, I top it off at night. Okay. That's all I do. I'm not going from zero, full to zero every day. I'm not doing that. Independent of that, the car sits with a plug in it, not charging a lot. Right. And so if you think about that storage and the capability of the power company to access that during peak hours, and maybe you sell that to the power company, that capability, and then they sell it back to you off peak. There's a great business model there, and that's what we're doing with PG&E and Bolts on the West Coast. So they've got real storage problems out there. So they're going to buy a lot of our Bolts and have those people use those as part of the problems they have with storage. And so that's a great two-way inverter on a car can allow that energy to go back and forth. And that's why those peaks will be dealt with, I think, by the storage capability of electric vehicles on the grid. And so not everybody, different time zones, the whole thing. And that's a very, very capable model.
A question from Brady, who is an alum. Where do you see hydrogen, ICE, and fuel cell in the mix? Do you think full battery electric vehicles will be the right solution for all regions and uses?
Absolutely not. And I'll give you we have a great fuel cell. We're in a partnership with Honda for manufacturing that right here in Michigan. And so our Gen 3 fuel cell is we're just beginning to sell that to locomotive companies. And so it takes about 25 of those fuel cells to run a train. So if you think about the duty cycle of a fuel cell versus the duty cycle and the energy density required for a battery pack, they're quite different. If you can picture a train that takes a ton of energy to get up to speed, and then the kinetic energy that can be maintained is much, much less, a fuel cell is almost a perfect duty cycle for that. Flip that over to a heavy duty truck. Heavy duty trucks, with big diesel engines, and those are really people use those to make a living. They plow snow, they tow, they haul, they do everything, right? And so that's part of the big powerful supply chain in the United States. That is not suited for the energy density and batteries. There's too much battery. There's too much trade-off needed to perform that, and then you lose the range. So our hydrogen fuel cells, I'm not going to say we're doing this because I don't want to make news on this, but I believe the heavy duty pickup truck market is an ideal candidate for hydrogen fuel cells. I'd also say hydrogen fuel cells as they become, there is an infrastructure piece of that, but if you look at the big heavy duty trucks that run the roads, fuel cells are absolutely perfect for that as well. And those are really repetitive routes normally. So the hydrogen fuel infrastructure to feed those routes of transportation of goods is ideally suited for the big mass transit trucks that you see on our highways should be fuel cells. So that's I think is going to happen first.
Hey, another question from Brian. As historically, profit margins in the industry are relatively small, 5 to 10%, compared to products in other arenas. What do you see as the biggest opportunities for margin growth or revenue streams?
That's a great question as well. Yeah, you're absolutely right on the margin structure today. I think the data and the things that we can deliver customers that are based on data to give value and things that people want on a software basis to our customers. If you think about it, the electric vehicle becomes a platform to deliver the goods and services that our customers want. We have something called the software-defined vehicle, which sits on top of our electric vehicles. And that's really the revenue growth opportunity for us. And just think of things like OnStar. OnStar is our, we've been in telematics for, 20 years. The data that we have that you allow us to access on your driving habits can quickly be converted into OnStar insurance and offer more competitive insurance rates for you as a customer based on your driving habits. And so it's one click away in the car. That's a big, big competitive advantage. And so those types of things in the car on use and delivering back value for how you use it can make a more efficient design, but it also can deliver things that you can't even imagine, right into your connected vehicle life. And so those are big revenue growth opportunities, I believe. Crash avoidance is another one. And as we get more sophisticated with our camera systems, our radar systems, our LiDAR systems, crash avoidance is something that people take very, very seriously. So those are big opportunities for us. And I think the sky's the limit on a lot of that from a data standpoint.
Common question for a lot of consumers. From a consumer perspective, it's difficult to buy a new or used car right now if you want a popular model. How much of this is due to the chip shortage, and when do you expect the supply of vehicles to improve?
It's all due to the chip shortage, I would say. But I would also lump in there the pandemic because, it's really hard for us to get a steady state operational model across all of our assembly plants when we have outbreaks, globally, frankly, in some of those facilities. And so, it's hard to predict, which makes it really hard to supply. And it's tough on us, and we're doing the best we can as an industry, but it is really hard because the chip piece of this is not in the United States at this time. And it's not one of us, OEMs or car makers that has the volume to put a chip facility in for $5 billion and make money on it. That's millions of capacity that has to be, that's an industry capacity. That's why the industry is having a tough time, because there's only a handful of people doing this because they have all the volume to make a business out of it. So it's a pretty tough deal, and it's very much stabilizing. But I would say it's, are we getting back to filling dealer lots? We're not, but it's getting a lot better than it was.
Here's a big picture question. Like, what's one simple thing all car owners can do to reduce the carbon footprint, whether they own a gas car or an electric car?
I think your driving habits is probably the biggest single thing that you can do. And that's, an electric car, we have something called one pedal driving, which has regen on the paddle shifters. And so you can get a ton of range out of an electric car, for instance, just out of driving habits. I'd also say the same thing on any vehicle that you drive. I mean, if you're constantly deep into the throttle, and hard braking and all that stuff, those driving habits have a massive effect on fuel economy. And so I would say it's still the single biggest thing is actually in everybody's hands.
Here's probably our last audience question. We're coming up on time, and this kind of ties this matches nicely with the pairing of Detroit and Nashville on this event. A question by Ben, an alum. As one thinks about the disruptions that might soon take place with mobility, EVs and autonomous vehicles, there's a risk that some communities, especially in Michigan, could be left behind in the transition. Do you see increased support for considering the impact on community stakeholders when you're setting up business strategy, deciding where to build plants and all of that?
Oh my gosh, yes. I mean, we just spent $7 billion, our biggest investment ever in Michigan. And so, this is not casual stuff. We spent another $4.3 billion in outside of Nashville and Spring Hill. We're going to spend, if you look at our legacy auto plants, as we convert those, has a massive impact on the community. We're going to bring back probably 3,300 jobs to. That's just the plant jobs into Detroit-Hamtramck. That's not the supplier. That's not counting the supplier jobs. So, yeah, I mean those are not the least expensive things we could have done. Let me put it that way. And so we want this area to be the highest tech, most profitable production sites wherever we do this. We want those to. That's what we want. That's what we want. And so, yeah, we're very civic minded on that. Very much so. It's everything, right? I mean, it's everything, right? I mean, at the end of the day, it's people.
Great. Thanks, Mark. That wraps up our student questions. I personally thank you for spending the time.